NATO unleashes hell on the Russian border after Putin targets the US-led bloc and tries to turn the Baltic into a zone of permanent threat. On this Wednesday, June 3, 2026, the response that appears on the eastern flank isn't just empty talk. It comes in the form of concrete barriers, military command, and a real state of alert. Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania are moving forward with the Baltic defense line, while NATO prepares a new structure to act faster if Moscow tries to cross the border. Putin accused Latvia of paving the way for Ukrainian drones against Russian territory and threatened to treat locations linked to attacks as legitimate targets. And he also signed a law that creates a loophole to use troops outside of Russia under the pretext of protecting Russian citizens. That's where the calculation changes. What was Putin trying to intimidate? Why did NATO respond with concrete? How did this border become a trap? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. Latvia has started installing so-called dragon's teeth on the border with Russia. They are concrete blocks used to make it harder for military vehicles to pass, especially tanks and armored vehicles. The measure was carried out in areas expropriated for national defense with compensation to the owners because the Latvian government decided to treat the Russian threat as a matter of territorial survival. The installation is part of a larger plan, coordinated with Estonia and Lithuania, to close off the most sensitive routes in the Baltics against a possible land offensive from Moscow. These barriers are not being put up just to decorate the border. They are meant to delay an invading force, hinder rapid movements, and buy time for NATO to respond. In practice, Latvia is saying Russia will not find open roads, open bridges, or a weak border. Any Russian advance, if it is ever attempted, would have to face physical obstacles, trenches, defensive positions, surveillance, and integration with Allied command. Putin expected fear, but he's finding readiness instead. Estonia had already been reinforcing checkpoints in the Narva region, a sensitive area because it faces Russia and has both symbolic and military value. The bridge over the Narva River is a sensitive point because it faces Russia. Estonian authorities are putting up gates and barriers to better control incoming traffic and prevent unauthorized movements. The problem isn't just Russian tanks. There's also migration pressure, border provocations, tests of sovereignty, and attempts at political attrition. Lithuania has also put up barriers near Kaliningrad, the Russian territory between Poland and Lithuania. This point bothers Moscow because Kaliningrad is a strategic Russian asset within the Baltic region. When Lithuania puts up obstacles and incorporates this into a military engineering plan, it shows that it won't wait for a crisis to happen before improvising. Defense begins before the attack, and that's the logic that Putin doesn't like to see. NATO is now preparing something even more serious. The German-Dutch Corps is expected to take command of Allied forces in Estonia and Latvia in the event of a conflict with Russia. Reuters reported that this change aims to strengthen the eastern flank and speed up the arrival of troops if Moscow tests the region. The Corps is based in Münster, Germany. It brings together 16 nations and can serve as a command structure to organize larger forces in times of emergency. This detail is decisive because modern warfare doesn't just depend on putting soldiers on the map, it depends on command, logistics, communication, and speed. NATO already has an important structure in the northeast, linked to the multinational command based in Poland, but now it wants to better divide responsibilities in the Baltics. For Estonia and Latvia, this means faster reinforcement. For Putin, it means less chance to exploit confusion in the first days of a crisis. Putin targeted the US-led Axis when he started treating Western support for Ukraine as a justification to threaten NATO nations. Russian intelligence accused Latvia of allowing Ukraine to prepare drone attacks from Latvian bases. Riga denied it and called the accusation a disinformation campaign. Even so, Moscow raised the tone and spoke of an appropriate response. This is the old Russian tactic. They create an accusation, spread pressure, measure the reaction, and try to push the opponent's psychological boundary. The tension became even more serious when Putin signed a law allowing the use of Russian forces abroad under the argument of protecting Russian citizens. In the face of arrest, trial, detention, or alleged persecution, for the Baltics, this kind of measure raises an immediate red flag. Latvia and Estonia have significant Russian communities, and Moscow has already used the narrative of protecting Russians outside its borders as a political tool. When the Kremlin turns this into legal authorization for military action, the message to its neighbors is dangerous. That's when NATO's decision gains political weight. It's not about provoking war, it's about preventing Putin from thinking there's an open door. The message is simple. If Moscow tries to fabricate a pretext, the border will already be more closed. If it tries to cross with armored vehicles, it will encounter barriers. If it tries to create confusion, it will find Allied command. If it tries to intimidate small nations, it will find Article 5 at the center of the table. NATO has understood that weakness in the face of Putin does not reduce the threat. It only increases the Kremlin's appetite. The drone war has also pushed the Baltic region into a new phase. Air raids, drone crashes, and civil defense alerts have led the Baltic nations to seek Ukrainian expertise in shelters against drones and missiles. This shows that the threat is not just a classic land invasion. The real fear today involves air attacks, sabotage, hybrid warfare, pressure on civilians, and attempts to collapse public trust. Ukraine has become a harsh lesson for those living near Russia. Meanwhile, Russia itself is facing attacks on its own territory. This week, Ukrainian drones hit areas of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region just as Moscow was trying to project strength at its major economic forum. This detail exposes Putin's contradiction. Estonia is reinforcing crossings because it has already seen Russia test the limits on the Narva River. Lithuania is protecting its area in front of Kaliningrad because it knows that weakness there would be an invitation. And NATO is putting in military command because talk without capability doesn't hold back an expansionist dictator. Putin's Russia still tries to sell the image of a power that decides the fate of others, but the reaction from the Baltics shows a different picture. Small nations preparing themselves with composure, allied support, and a clear sense of danger. There is no blind trust. There is a reinforced border. There is no naivety. There is calculation. There is no passive waiting. There is action, command, and defense. The next step now is to observe how Moscow reacts to the new military arrangement. If Putin continues threatening Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, NATO is likely to strengthen the eastern flank even further. More vigilance, more readiness, more integration, and more pressure for Europe to take on a larger share of its own defense. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the facts every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community. Next,